In 1975, I I went to Christmas in Mazatlan with my parents. We always went, and because I graduated early from school, um, I decided I was going to go on a walkabout around Mexico. And sorry, mom and dad, I did every single thing that they wished I had never done in 1974 in Mexico. I ended up hooking up with this guy from Texas. His name was Gary Alonso. And so we started tripping around, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. I spoke some Spanish. I played my flute. So one of the funny things was I was playing this song that I thought was a Mexican folk song. And it turns out it was written by a friend of Eric Dolphy's. It was called Music Matador, but it must be based on a Mexican song. Because I'd go to the Zocalo and I'd play this song, and people would show up and dance. And anyway, it was a super cool time. But Gary and I had both watched Chariots of the Gods by Eric von Däniken, and we'd heard that one of his big pieces of evidence to support his claim was that in Palenque, there was this picture of what he said was a spaceman in a spacesuit, and there was rockets, and he was manning a space control thing. Anyway, that's what he said. And I don't know if you remember, at the time, Van Danken was a big thing, Chariots of the Gods. So we were going to go to Palenque, and we were going to find out. So we took the bus there. I guess the bus, Mexican bus, it went forever. We get to Palenque. We got a hotel. So the next morning we got up, we go to Palenque, and we spend the whole day looking at all this stuff. And we saw what was supposed to be this spaceman, and it looked like 10,000 other stone carvings at Palenque. So we were pretty unimpressed. And so we were tired. We went back to the hotel, and we had dinner. And in the morning we got up, and the clerk in the hotel said, he knew we were young guys looking for fun. He said, it rained last night, so if you go down like a mile down the road here, there's an old cattle field, and there's hallucinogenic mushrooms grow there. And are you sure? And he said, oh no, I'm sure. So we wander down, and there's these three guys sitting there. And we didn't know, one was Spanish, one was German, and one was Dutch. And we said, well, what kind of mushrooms do you eat? And the one guy said, purple. And they were all purple. I guess psilocybin makes the mushroom purple. We said, well, how many do you eat? And they said, well, as many as you want, right? So it seemed like a good idea to us anyway. So we start wandering out, on the wet grass, and we start eating mushrooms. And we wander off for a bit, and I look over at my buddy, and we're on our hands and knees eating mushrooms. I said, we didn't eat breakfast, and I'm full. So we should probably stop eating mushrooms now. So we turned around, and there's the guys like, a couple hundred yards away, and you could see where we'd gone in the wet grass that all the mushrooms were gone. So I don't know how many of these hallucinogenic mushrooms we ate, but it was a lot. So turns out we barely got back to where these guys were. And when we did, nobody said anything for hours and hours. We were just so high. I remember, flying through the air and looking down at myself, and just a huge feeling of euphoria, right? It was unbelievable. So, I don't know how many hours passed, and we started trying to communicate with each other. And we had the Dutch guy who spoke some English, and the German guy who spoke a bit of English, and the Spanish guy didn't speak any English, and a guy from Texas spoke some Spanish, and I spoke some English. Anyway, we were trying to communicate, but all we could agree on is Von Däniken is full of shit, right? And we tried saying it in Dutch, and we tried saying it in English, but when we said it in German, Von Däniken is Voller Schizer, for some reason, we just laughed our heads off. And every time one of us would say it, the German guy, as high as we were, would correct us. No, Von Däniken is Voller Schizer. And so we would say it wrong on purpose. And Oh man, and that day changed my life. I can tell you that. It was a couple of days anyway. So we sat there, we laughed, and we eventually said goodbye to those guys. We'd come down. It took days, right? And we wandered off on our own way. I eventually parted ways with Gary, and years later, I found out that Von Danken was completely discredited. That they said that on the sarcophagus that it was just a traditional Mayan, not a spaceman, in a traditional Mayan costume, and the supposed spaceship shit was him making traditional Mayan hand gestures, and that the rockets were serpents, and the flames were the serpents' beards. So it turns out in the end that 5 guys completely wiped out on hallucinogenic mushrooms were right, and the writer of the best-selling novel and the best-selling movie was Voller Schizer.